He makes a living telling the stories of others. He's done a great job of doing that and has been nominated for awards. Now it's time to turn the camera on him, tell his story. It's Jeff Tourial, Associate Athletic Director, Communications, UC San Diego. The job title is a lot lengthier, but just for the sake of having a conversation with him and not having it go 2 hours, we're going to just start off with that as far as his job title. He joins me on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Also grateful to do some work with the Big West. And this is an opportunity to point out what makes Jeff inspirational and look at his journey, and not just from a professional standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. And Jeff, I appreciate you being a part of this. Obviously, I can tell that you're a well-read man with all the books behind you and all that good
stuff. I don't know
stuff.
that I've read them all. Some of them,
well, at least they're good.
Wife, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're good decorations. I'll tell you what. One thing that is not a decoration, but is on your resume, is a time in your life I want to get to first as we begin this conversation, and that is when you were with the Allentown Ambassadors. Where do you stow away those old play-by-play audio clips of you from those days?
That is an awesome question, Bryan. And I actually have, so I was with the Ambassadors. I was an independent baseball team in Pennsylvania. And I was there 2 seasons doing the play-by-play. And the first season, my first real job out of college, I guess, I have every cassette tape in my garage. I don't know that I have a tape player anymore to play them. But I do have them on cassette, and one of these years I'm going to get them digitized, because my goodness, that would be some embarrassing stuff to go back and listen to that.
What do you think is your best call from those days?
You know, I'll tell you what it was. I don't remember the specific game, but I do remember the circumstance. We were playing in Quebec City on a Friday night, and the Capitales were a new team in the league that year. And their fan base was rabid, and they had an older stadium with an overhang covering most of the seats, and people brought air horns and other artificial noisemakers, and it was super loud. And their shortstop, who was hitting under 200, he tormented us all season, and he hit this go-ahead 3-run homer. I want to say it was in the 7th inning. That may not be right, but he hit a go-ahead 3-run homer, and the place went bonkers, and it was really cool. I didn't have a signature call or anything like that, especially given the fact that we were winning and now we're losing. But you can hear the disappointment in my voice as the ball goes out. And even if you had just flipped on the radio, you knew something not fun had happened for the home team or for our team.
What did it sound like?
Well, it was, fly ball to deep left. So-and-so, I don't remember who, goes back, can't make the play. It's over the wall. 3-run homer, and Anton French has done it again. And I just laid out for 15, 20 seconds, and just, you heard the crowd go bananas. And then I tried to come back and explain what had just happened and how they'd gone in front, and how this guy who was hitting under 200 and had 4 or 5 home runs, and I'm not kidding, 3 or 4 of those were against us. And for whatever reason, he hit us well. To the fact that we put him on our team the next year. He was really fast. He stole a lot of bases, but he couldn't hit.
He couldn't hit. You travel a lot, and if you haven't reached 1,000,000 miles as far as a frequent flyer, airplane traveler, I don't know, you're very close. With those early days working in minor league baseball and before you got to West Coast Conference in the Big West, obviously you've done so much traveling. What is the most arduous travel that you've put yourself through, covering an event or an assignment where people behind the scenes know what you went through, but anybody else would be like, oh my goodness, Jeff had to go through that to get to there?
A couple of them come to mind. One, I'll start with Quebec City, because we were just talking about that. First of all, it's an amazing, beautiful city. And if you've not been, I highly recommend you put it on your list. So we went up there a couple of times a year because of they were in our league for baseball. So we go up there a couple of times a year. It's about a 14-hour bus ride. But what happened that was interesting was we're crossing an international border. And this was pre 9/11, so times were certainly different. But not all of the players on our team were necessarily properly documented. And so they couldn't necessarily enter Canada. Yeah. And so what would happen, and apparently it was with other teams in the league too, I asked around, but in our case, we'd stop at a motel near the border, and those X number of players would get off and they'd get a couple of rooms and they would stay behind. And so we'd go play shorthanded and come back. But that was a long trip. I don't sleep on buses or planes, unfortunately. And so just being on an uncomfortable bus for 14 hours, plus stops, and you don't control the climate, you don't control the radio or what movie they're playing. And this was obviously well before smartphones, so there wasn't much to kind of stay entertained. And it was so I'd read some books or just kind of stare out the window and look at the pretty scenery. So that was tough. The other one, back in college, I worked for a student radio station, but we weren't the one that was owned by the university. We were the independent, like renegade ones, right? And so the university had their station calling men's basketball and football games. They let us broadcast the women's basketball games, which is incredible. I had an amazing experience, but we had to do it at our own expense. And so my buddy and I saved up some money, and our team played in a Thanksgiving tournament in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And so again, another amazing experience, but saving up money from summer jobs and so on to buy our own airfare and find our own hotel. We didn't stay where the team stayed. We stayed at the most budget-friendly place we could find to call those games on a military base in San Juan, which was really a cool experience.
Jeff Tourial is with me, Associate Athletic Director Communications, UC San Diego, works with, of course, the Big West, has worked with WCC, a lot of broadcasting experience, and then also a radio producer from his Atlanta days. I want to get to that in a moment, but you mentioned college. Obviously, you went to Syracuse and the fine programs they have there from a broadcasting standpoint and beyond. What were those summer jobs that you were doing to try to fund some of these broadcasting exploits?
I didn't have many. I worked at a movie theater for several years, and I loved it. And I still say, my wife would strongly disagree, but I still say if I could make the financials work and still be the box office attendant or the ticket taker or the popcorn popper guy, I would do that job. I loved it. I had the best time, to the point where one of my buddies, we were in high school at the time, and then I would do it in summers in college too. They would let us record the outgoing greeting on the number. So when you called the phone number, because back then the listings were in the newspaper, right? And you call the pre-recorded number to hear what time all the movies played. And he and I would record that. So every Thursday night at 10:30 or whenever we closed, we'd record it for Friday, which is when new movies came out. And we'd record, here are the show times for Jurassic Park or whatever it might have been. Loved that job.
You let us relive a broadcasting call, but if you are, let's say I have the recorder out, you're in the movie theater, and now you have to start to lay out the show times, what is your voice going to sound like during that presentation?
I'd probably ham it up a little, especially now, given the fact that who in the world would call that thing, right? You pick up your phone and you can instantly see what time a movie is playing or whatever else you want to do in life. But we had it down. Thank you for calling General Cinema, Sandy Springs at Parkside, located at the corner of Roswell Road, Cliffwood Drive, and Sandy Springs Circle. Our box office hours are blah, blah, blah. And then you go into the prices and the movie times. And again, with my buddy Todd, we'd get to the point where we would literally do a duet, and we kind of back and forth the lines. And we just had the best time. And I can only imagine what our managers thought. But, for them, they didn't have to do it. It sounded good. And, they weren't paying us extra for it. It didn't cost them anything. One other quick side on that, my freshman year of college, so I went off to Syracuse. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, so that's far away, right? They used to mail me micro cassettes, and I had a micro cassette recorder, and they'd send me the show times for like the next week, and I'd mail it back. That only happened for maybe a month or two, and then it obviously stopped. But so for a time, I was in Syracuse, New York, voicing the movie theater recording for a cinema in Atlanta, Georgia.
How much do you attribute your broadcasting career from the inspiration you gained in recording those promo pieces for movie theaters?
I think it probably goes the other way. I had the broadcast interest, and this was just an opportunity I wouldn't even call it experience. That's a stretch, but an opportunity to practice, I guess, in front of an audience of one or zero. And if I mess up, you just hit delete and record it again. So I had fun with it. I really did. But I don't know that inspired me to be a broadcaster again. I'd say it was the other way around.
Broadcaster, also a producer from a radio perspective. Jeff Tourial is with me with UC San Diego, Associate Athletic Director. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Also do some work with UC San Diego and the Big West. So 1996, you were a radio producer, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff, in Atlanta. Obviously, you're a big Braves fan. Sorry to hear about the whole Freddie Freeman situation. I'm not going to bring that up. I know that it's going to sting a little bit. But being a part of the radio layout in Atlanta during the Summer Olympics in Atlanta, obviously, there were some crazy things that happened during that Olympics. From your perspective, what was it like, and how close were you to what was going on there?
It was an amazing experience, being that close to the Olympics, and to be as close as we were, and have the access to the games. I mean, at the time, that was the most kind of public Olympics ever, and the accessibility for fans and spectators to go. Just as a fan, I'd never seen team handball before, right? But I got to go to the gold medal game, and that's really cool. And I went to the women's basketball gold medal game with a college buddy who had come down from Massachusetts. And this was in Georgia Dome, right? So it's like a 60,000 seat football stadium that they're playing a basketball game in. And we bought, as ticket as we could find up in the upper deck. And we brought a tape recorder and we practiced. We did a demo tape in the stand. So again, somewhere in that garage, I have that tape too. It was awesome. In terms of being a radio producer, the sports talk station in Atlanta, and I produced the morning show at the time. And so we did our show live from Radio Row, and that was really cool. I wouldn't say we necessarily got better guests as a result, because we were still high school and on the Braves and University of Georgia football and all the things that mattered the most to our audience. But being around it was really neat, right? The fabulous Sports Babe, who had a big syndicated show at that time, was 2 seats over. And so that was kind of the night of the bombing, which was in Centennial Olympic Park, which we're broadcasting from. Fortunately, I wasn't there. I actually was going to go. There was a free concert that night, and I know some friends that were going, but I had to work in the movie theater. And again, like kind of that making that money. And so it sounds awful to say, but I was very fortunate not to have been there that night. I was selling popcorn.
The grind that you've had in your career, the resilience, the steely nerves, from selling popcorn to help fund a dream in broadcasting, and finally your career through sports media. Where did you grab on to first, that insatiable desire to want to make it, to succeed in this passion, in this career of yours?
Well, I mean, like a lot of little kids, I was a big sports fan, right? And I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. But unfortunately, I was a crummy athlete. I'm just uncoordinated, and I just wasn't very good. I was the kid who knew all the rules and the strategy and what we were trying to do. I just couldn't necessarily go execute it. And so I knew at a pretty young age that one way to stay involved in sports was broadcasting. And again, going back to the Braves, very fortunate that their games were broadcast nationally on TBS, as many people know. But it was that same broadcast group, the same four broadcasters, also did the Braves radio. And so the two of them would start on radio, two on TV, and they'd switch in the middle of the fifth. So I would sit in my bedroom and listen to the game on the radio. And that's kind of where my passion for that came from. And I would do the same with University of Georgia football or Atlanta Hawks basketball. One of the Braves broadcasters broadcast the Hawks games. And so listening to him and I'd record some of those games and listen to it back. You can insert your judgment of me there, but I loved it, and I really became a passion, had a passion for sports broadcasting on the radio, play by play, more so than talk.
How has your wife been your biggest advocate?
She's my biggest supporter, and however goofy something sounds or crazy it seems, she encourages me to go pursue it. And, I try to return the favor. And so, we both had really good jobs in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we were very happy, but she got an opportunity down in San Diego. And so I said, we got to go, let's go. And so we moved to San Diego for her career, knowing that might mean changes for my career. And I didn't hesitate. And she would have done the same for me in a second, and does support me to that manner all the time. And so we're both very fortunate in that regard.
You guys make a great team. Jeff Tourial is with me, Associate Athletic Director, Communications, UC San Diego. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Also grateful to help out with UC San Diego as well. So you got to San Diego based upon your wife's work, and the passion for sports was still there. So from an inside look of you, where were you able to finally figure out where to go? And then the Triton sort of came into your vision, and then you were able to really take advantage of your talents and helping them grow.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So we moved down here, and I was still working for the West Coast Conference, and I did for about another 8 months in the Bay Area. So that commuting back and forth was a grind. It was a lot, but I loved that job. I really did, and I thought I made a pretty big impact there. So I was pretty proud of the work we did. It just so happened that UC San Diego was going through a transition from Division II to Division I. One of my good friends is a senior associate athletic director at UCSD, and was talking to me ever since I moved down here. And I kind of pushed him off, no, I got a really good job up in San Francisco and I love what I do. And he and I stayed in touch. And obviously at some point my circumstance changed, and was very fortunate that they had an opening that seemed to be a fit for me. And it's been really cool to be a part of this transition to D1 from Division II, and get to build something from scratch. It doesn't come along very much.
The work that you're doing in UC San Diego doing is absolutely incredible. The facilities, the broadcasting capabilities are just so top notch. People love working with you and they love what you do. Why is that? Why do you have such a compelling, endearing aura around you?
I don't know that I would describe it that way as much as you know, people who have an interest in sports and want to work in sports. There are a lot of us, but it is a grind, and it's long hours, and it's nights and weekends, and there's a lot of non-glamorous things that go with it. But those who are passionate about it really have a passion for what they do. And in our case, getting to work with the scholar athletes on a daily basis is something that really fuels the fire, and it's exciting. And no 2 days are the same. And I'm kind of fidgety and antsy, and I can't sit still for too long. So being able to work in sports and run around at games and competitions, and still travel some, which I love to do, this is just a great fit for me. As far as people working with me, I mean, I tend to look at it more they can put up with me, but I do. I try to respect others, and push titles aside and all of those kinds of things, and just treat everybody as an equal, and certainly consider everybody's opinion, and try to work that way, whether it's working with those above me or those adjacent to me, and treat everybody with respect.
You have such a great track record, and everywhere you've gone, Jeff, the environment has flourished under you, and that continues at UC San Diego. I want to leave you with one last question here. And knowing the responsibilities you have now with the Tritons, like you said, you're running to practices and games and working long hours, and people are more than putting up with you. Let's be honest here, especially come a basketball game. So you're gonna in a game season, you're gonna have a late game, 7 o'clock, whatever tip off, and you're gonna have to be there when the game ends and you finished up some of your work and you're driving home. During that drive home, what are you thinking about?
That's a great question. I tend to, I've finished my work and I'm finally on my way home. I tend to use that time to try to decompress. And so I'll listen to music or a podcast or something just in the background, not something I'm intently paying attention to, that's really not related to the game I was just at, or the story I just wrote, or the highlights we just provided, or any of those kinds of things. I try to step back. Inevitably, when I walk in the door and it's time to brush my teeth and wash my face and get ready for bed, that's when I start wondering, did I put the right photos in the photo gallery, or did our highlights make the 11 o'clock news? So I'll come in here into the living room and switch channels from CBS to ABC to Fox to NBC, and switch around and try and see where our highlights are or are not. And then I wind myself back up, and then it usually takes another hour or so to wind down and before I can go to bed.
Jeff Tourial, full of energy, full of charisma, full of pizzazz. The conference, the School of UC San Diego is so better off with you in it. Really appreciate the conversation. I'm Bryan Fenley. This is the On to Something podcast. Had so much fun talking about your life. And I'm sure, Jeff, you got some questions that you probably weren't expecting, but give us a better introspection into who you are as a human being.
Definitely some unique questions, Bryan. I appreciate that. Thanks for the time.